Friends, we gather together this afternoon to celebrate the life and to honor the memory of Eleanor Gogolick. Ellie's family so very much appreciates your presence here with them this afternoon, which offers them a great deal of comfort and support. Adonai ma'adam v'teda'ehu ben enosh v'chashvehu. O Lord, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath. Our days are like a passing shadow. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, in the evening it fades and it withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, "Return, you mortal creatures." Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. The author of the first of the Bible's 150 Psalms expresses in language both poignant and succinct the nature of the good life and the fruits of that life. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked, nor taken the path of sinners, nor joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, whose foliage never fades, and whose fruit always flourishes. Let us take comfort now together in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Kohelet, the author of the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, reminds us that for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. First, I'm going to read a statement written by Ellie's son, Howard, and then I'm going to read a statement written by her daughter, Gail. Eleanor was born in Pueblo, Colorado in 1927 to Irene and Irving Kleiman. Ellie and her younger brother, Seymour, the children of a physician of general practice, were exposed to a small town of varied nationalities and religions, including a small Jewish community. It was this environment where Ellie not only learned the essence of Judaism, she was raised in a traditional kosher-keeping home, but she also learned to love people of all backgrounds. Ellie's undying devotion to her parents was a constant throughout her life. Ellie graduated from the University of Colorado in Boulder with a bachelor's degree in music and a minor in drama. She was in numerous bands while in school. Her instrument was the piano. She also sang. Although she was an elementary school music teacher for a brief time, she made a career out of teaching piano. Her home was filled with music. Her students loved her. She played magnificently. She was fixed up with Irving Skolnick, a traveling clothing salesman from Salt Lake City, and they were engaged 3 weeks later. Married in 1951, they had Gail, their first child, in 1952 while living in Pueblo. Then to Beechwood, where Irv sold Farah men's clothing in Cleveland. Howard was born in 1963. Along the way, the family moved to New York City and then to California, to Waco, Texas, and then back to Cleveland. In 1974, after 23 years of marriage, Irv died at 49 years of age of a heart attack while jogging at the old JCC on Mayfield Road. Times were tough, and Ellie persevered, working as a piano teacher and in retail. Then she met the second love of her life, Roland Gogolick, married him in 1977, and had 34 loving years of marriage. They serendipitously moved back to Beechwood, where Howard was born. After Roland died in July 10th, 2012, Ellie slowly made her way out of her Beechwood home and over to her Beechwood apartment at Myers. Ellie was a social butterfly, constantly entertaining, playing bridge masterfully, volunteering in Mother's Singers, and active in Hadassah. Whip smart, she prided herself on being a wordsmith, thriving on Scrabble and crossword puzzles her entire life. She was also an avid reader, from novels to The Plain Dealer. She loved the symphony and the theater and frequented them with regularity. She loved television drama, Walton's Little House on the Prairie, for example. She also loved baseball and game shows. She loved. There are 3 loves here on the page. She loved animals, especially dogs, and always donated to the shelters. Ellie touched everyone who had the good fortune of crossing her path with her grace, her wisdom, her wit, and her love. She was loved by all. She had a keen sense of character and always elicited a smile. She was a popular lady at Myers, and she remained active to the very end, playing bridge hours before she died. Suffering over the last 18 months with congestive heart failure and COPD, she battled some quite uncomfortable moments with poise, dignity, grace, and love, never, ever complaining. She wanted nothing but love and gave it out freely. Her home health care workers adored her, as did the Foxy ladies, with whom she shared countless hours, chatting by the fish tank about sometimes racy topics. She loved the rabbi at Myers, the musical presentations, the lectures, the art room where she thrived, and dining with all of her lovely friends. She loved Gail and Howard and her entire family with all her might. She will be missed by all. And now from her daughter, Gail. My mom and I were born at the same hospital, St. Mary Corwin in Pueblo, Colorado, also the hospital where my grandfather was a doctor. We moved around a lot due to the fact that my dad wanted to give my mom the very best and to better his family's life. He always told her, "You are the best." From Pueblo, we moved to Denver, where my mother taught music in elementary school. From Denver, we moved to Cleveland, where my mom was extremely involved in her music, as always, playing the piano constantly. From childhood through my 20s and 30s, I remember laying on the couch and listening to my mom play her music. My mom loved entertaining. She loved playing bridge. She loved her needlepoint and embroidery. She lived for dinner parties and enjoyed the finer things in life. She had her own dressmaker from Paris here in Cleveland, Ramon Saunders, who made her elaborate evening dresses and beautiful suits. My mom loved her clothes and her shoes. When I think of my parents, I think of the Camelot years. They loved entertaining, the arts, Broadway. They went out every single Saturday night. They had a passion for one another and for the finer things in life. My mom would wear her mink stole and live it up while drinking a Manhattan or a martini. From Cleveland, we moved to East Chester, New York. Immediately, my mom became involved with the neighbors and helped to form dinner groups. Wherever she moved, she had dinner groups. She absolutely loved to cook. I was her party girl and helped my mom to set up and clean up. We were a team. She was an unbelievable homemaker by taking care of my brother and me and making our home beautiful, all the while my dad was busy working. My mom taught me how to do all these things. She really was a lady ahead of her time. It was in Cleveland that I established a very big daily afternoon routine with my mom. I would walk home from Fairmont School every day at noon, and she would have lunch ready for me. We would watch Love of Life, a soap opera, with our TV trays in front of us. This is where I got my love of soap operas. Walnut Creek, California, was the next place that we moved to. It was here that my mom formed wine groups and progressive dinner groups with her neighbors. She taught the famous Mike Miller, who worked with Henry Mancini to write the music for Solid Gold. My mom always welcomed my friends during the hippie era, where our door was always open. My mom was the cool mom. All of my friends really liked her. She encouraged me to take guitar lessons since she had given up on me as a pianist. Music was her heart. From California, we moved to Waco, Texas, and because of my parents' bridge playing, they made wonderful friends. My mom became very involved in the temple there. She entertained all the time for their friends and my dad's business colleagues. At the drop of a hat, she could have an evening planned for 15 people. We then moved back to Cleveland in 1972. My mom had a lot of piano students yet again. She worked at Kelly Kidd at Richmond Mall selling clothes, another passion of hers. Because we moved back to Cleveland, that was how I met my husband, Bill. Bill's dad, Max, was a carpenter and came over to give my mom and Raleigh an estimate to redo their kitchen. Max told me on the front lawn that he had a boy for me, which led to a blind first date, and the rest is history! Exclamation mark. My mom volunteered at Hillel every Tuesday for many years in the deli, where I would bring Danielle and Jonathan as kids, and we would eat the hamburgers that she made. She also volunteered at Montefiore for years at the switchboard. My mom loved Bill. She sang to us at our wedding. I believe, Howard, you said that she sang at your bar mitzvah. Everything was about music to my mom. She was a wonderful grandmother to my kids, Danielle and Jonathan. We went to Disney World multiple times and on a cruise together. My mom never missed a hair appointment except when hospitalized. She was a woman of traditions. She loved hosting Passover and several holidays at her home using her fine china, which my daughter Danielle, who will continue those traditions, now has. My mom taught me well. Because of her, I have a love for recipe books, cooking, entertaining, clothes, kids, and dogs. She even had a mink stole made for our dear princess, who is no longer with us. Ironically, My mom just mentioned one of our favorite memories to me less than a month ago. For years, when I was a child, we used to have tea parties with my big blue and white teddy bear, Sam. My mom would bring out her good china, and we would have our tea parties together. My mom would have wanted me to end this eulogy, as I just did, on a very happy, pardon the pun, note. And now a few words of my own, based on my conversation with the family yesterday afternoon. Ellie, I came to learn, was a person of great refinement and great taste. In addition, she had definite values, which she often expressed with pithy sayings. Always put some money away for a rainy day, she would tell her children and her grandchildren. People plan and God laughs, she would warn, as her way, I imagine, of reminding people that things happen to us in life, things that we hadn't planned, and that we had better get used to rolling with the punches and adjusting to the reality which we have. This is certainly what Ellie did. And she captured this attitude of hers with yet another witticism. What is, and what was. From her own mother, whom she adored, Ellie got and often repeated the following: you want to get old, but you don't want to get old. And as we have just heard, this is just how Ellie lived her own life, getting old, but never old, even at 89. And she was always looking forward to the next activity, to the next shared experience with her beloved children and grandchildren. She captured that approach to life with the following conviction, which she evidently repeated as often as she could. We don't ever say goodbye. Rather, I'll see you later. Indeed, Ellie had a wonderful attitude. She never complained. She always approached life with a sense of perspective and a sense of humor. Eleanor Gogolick was lucky, and she was good. She had wonderful parents with whom she shared a loving relationship and for whom she felt great awe and later in her life, great nostalgia. In turn, she was a wonderful and devoted daughter, as well as a devoted and loving wife, mother, mother-in-law, and grandmother. And she had two wonderful marriages, with Irv for 23 years and with Raleigh for 34 years. Ellie is survived by her daughter Gail and by her son Howard, by her son-in-law Bill and Howard's girlfriend Christy, by her stepdaughters Karen and Barbie, by her stepsons-in-law Rick and Peter, and by her ex-step-son-in-law Harvey. By her grandchildren Danielle and Jeff, Jonathan, Lisa and Vaughn, Kitten and Greg, and Julian and Elsa, and by several nieces and nephews. She was predeceased by her parents, Irving and Irene, by her husbands, Irv and Raleigh, by her brother Cy, and by her stepdaughter, Janie. Ellie Gogolick lived a long and a richly lived life, a life filled with activity of many kinds, with friends and with family. Those who loved and admired her will never forget her. Zichrona livracha. The memory of Ellie Gogolick will always be our blessing. Amen. I now want to call on Ellie's grandson, Jonathan, who will speak for himself and also for his sister, Danielle.
to go ahead and read my sister's verse here. Okay. Danielle wrote this. When I think back on all the memories I have with my grandma, there are countless ones, but these are some of my favorites. My grandma always had names picked out for her cars, like Bluebell or Gray Lady, and she would always have a bouquet of colorful fake flowers affixed to her antenna so she could easily identify her car in a parking lot. I remember she would not leave the house without her Revlon lipstick, blue eyeshadow, and Jean Nate body splash. She always loved tending to her vegetable and fruit garden in the summers at her home on Glen Hill. She spent countless hours on the patio. She loved being outside, whether it was admiring her favorite pansies that she and my grandpa had planted, or drinking her home-brewed iced tea. My grandma always had bridge mix or miniature candy bars out at her house. Growing up, I would spend the night at my grandparents' house regularly. My grandma taught me how to play chopsticks on the piano at a young age, although I always wanted to learn to play the Simon and Garfunkel music she adored and played so flawlessly. She would take me to lunch at Woolworth's for a burger, fries, and a milkshake, and afterwards she would buy me old-time packets of gum, like Beeman's Blackjack and Clove. I was always scared to sleep alone upstairs in their house and thought there was a poltergeist that lived up there. So my grandpa would always sleep upstairs so I could stay downstairs with my grandma. We would stay up late watching I Love Lucy, and Mary Tyler Moore, and Bewitched. She would lay in bed working on her crossword puzzles. Excuse me. She would lay in bed working on her crossword puzzles, which she did up until the very end. And she would read novels. Her vocabulary was extensive because of it, and tell me stories about her life in Colorado, California, Texas, and trips she took around the world. My grandparents never missed a single dance recital, music, choir, concert I was in. It was unique that I had the opportunity to stay with my grandparents for 2 summers while I was home from college. My parents moved to Tampa, Florida, and I had an internship with Parker Hannafin here in Cleveland, where my grandpa also worked part-time. I don't know how my grandparents put up with having a college student staying with them for months at a time, but they never complained. My grandma would wait up for me until 2 a.m. on the weekends when I got back to their house after going to McNulty's on Coventry, just so she could hear about my drama-filled evenings. She would give me advice on coworkers and even named one saga the Roy of Our Lives. She loved birds and loved when I imitated them in a special voice, saying, "Tweet, tweet." It became a tradition for my grandma, parents, Jeff, and I to go to Sunday night dinners. Hoa was the popular choice and the last place we went about a week and a half ago. The night before my grandma passed away, I had the privilege to talk to her on the phone. She had left a message wishing me a happy birthday, and I called her back. She told me it was such a gift hearing my voice, asked about the new house my husband and I just moved into, the baby, work, etc. I jokingly told her she needed to hang on until the baby was born. There are no explanations, it was just her time. It has been a very difficult month. Our family's dog, Princess, who was like my own baby, passed away on January 3rd. My dad's mom, other grandma, passed away on my birthday. Just 2 days before my mom's grandma passed away. How is it possible to lose 2 grandmothers within 2 days of each other? Both of them were so excited to be great grandmas, and it saddens me tremendously that baby S will never get to meet these tremendous ladies, although they will be connected with the baby in the strongest way possible. Perhaps that is why God took them from us at this time. I will forever cherish all of the memories and stories I and stories I have of my grandma, and promise to share these with the baby so that her soul lives on. And thank you, Rabbi. I wrote a little something here as well. Let me start off by saying that my grandma was one of the sweetest, gentlest, most wisdom-filled women I have ever known. When a grandson imagines what his vision of the perfect grandmother would be, my grandma fulfilled that vision in literally every possible way. I have so many fond memories of her and I together, far too many to mention. My very first memory as a child was visiting her in the hospital in 1987 when she had just had a stroke. I was only 2 years old then, and I remember bringing her a Snoopy gumball dispenser, which she kept on display on her dresser for many years following. Growing up, I always looked forward to our summer nights together, sitting on her front porch glider at dusk, watching the fireflies together and just talking. The many sleepovers at my grandparents' house, where together we would play solitaire and war and watch the ball game. Watching the Indians was one of her favorite things to do. I remember sitting at the piano with her in their living room, playing Heart and Soul together, which of course she taught me. My grandma was very sensitive, loving, and most of all incredibly caring and patient. We took many trips together, too many to mention here. One trip in particular was one of my absolute fondest memories of my life, when my mom and I went to Washington, D.C. with her and my grandpa. Not only was the trip amazing, but we did what we always used to do on my regular weekend sleepovers at her house, which was lay in bed together at night, watching Nick at Night, and talking together while she worked on her crossword puzzles, which she almost always had completed before it was time to turn in for the night. Absolutely, without fail, every time I would walk into the room, my grandma's face would light up, and a big smile would stretch across her face. I loved showing up for a surprise visit, and it seemed that she loved it twice as much as I did. I always felt that my grandma and I shared a very special connection, and that I held a very special place in her heart. Excuse me. Although I moved to Florida and have been there for the better part of 10 years, our relationship certainly never faltered. I was fortunate enough to fly into Cleveland between Christmas and New Year's this past year and visit her at her apartment, as well as go to one of her favorite restaurants with her, Hunan by the Falls. She always loved Chagrin Falls, and together we looked at the Christmas lights and stared in awe at the beautiful tree and decorations. I certainly gained a lot of wisdom and learned some very important life lessons from my grandma and her wonderful stories. Above all, the most important thing to my grandma was my happiness, always asking every time we spoke if I was happy. And while the answer was not always yes, she always cared to hear what was going on with me and how I was feeling. I will miss you tremendously, Grandma, and have no doubt you're looking down on us, smiling and saying one of your favorite famous lines, "What is, and what was, was." I love you, Grandma, forever and always.
Now I'm going to call on Ellie's son, Howard.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, Jonathan. Very touching, very special, everything. And it's always, and thanks to everybody for coming. It's so special having the 10 and a half years between Gail and I, because even though we had each other, we were kind of, only children. And we have different perspectives of my mom, and different stories, different memories. And so I was sitting there and listening to some things that I didn't know. Gail always, she's the poet in the family, and has such a way with words. So, thanks. So, I typed out something over the last couple days, and I want to say I've heard Rabbi Klein before at Danielle's wedding, officiating the wedding, and he came over yesterday and just made this so beautiful and complete, and just felt like really one of the family yesterday. And he just has such a skillful way of bringing this together, and it's almost embarrassing after listening to you standing up here, and it was like you almost knew her, and you're a great conduit. Thank you. I was overwhelmed but not surprised by the reaction of the residents of the Myers Apartments where my mom lived for the last 3.5 years. Your mother was an inspiration to me, a woman said in art class yesterday in the activity room. And this woman, I happened to walk into the art class in the activity room, and they were painting Starry, Starry Night. And they were obviously, they had many art classes, these ladies, these residents, because they were fine pieces that they were painting. And it just struck me that this lady that actually knew how to paint made it a point to tell me that my mom inspired her. And she said it a couple of times, and it was touching. As another friend walked over to me yesterday, who I've met several times before, she has a European accent. I think she was from Greece, and I think she's Jewish, and I think she was of Greek royalty, as I recall. And she was walking with a walker, and she walked over to me and made an effort because I was talking to another group of women, and she gently said, I will really miss your mother. And excuse me, and then she broke down in tears. She said she came over at least once a week to my apartment to visit, and she just loved my cat. And she said, my cat yawned, and your mother looked at the cat and watched the cat yawn and looked at me and said, oh, look, the cat's yawning. Like, she didn't realize that, she knew dogs yawn, but she never had cats of her own, except she babysat mine once in a while. And she was in awe that the cat was yawning. And the cat, my mom said, used to walk on the back of the sofa and kind of walk on her head, and she was just thrilled. She was just thrilled with animals. So it didn't surprise me that she paid many visits to this woman. And this woman was touched. Others made it a point to approach me, not with sadness, but with happiness over the past couple days. saying, "Your mother always made me laugh. Your mother had such a wonderful sense of humor. Your mother was a tremendous bridge player. Your mother never complained. Your mother always smiled. Your mother and I would talk for hours. Your mother was my friend. Your mother was the most loved and popular person in this place. I loved your mother, and I will miss your mother." I ran into her friend Dorothy when Christy and I were there Monday night, and Dorothy made it a point to say, "Howard, your mother loved you so." And I told her I knew. I say I was overwhelmed but not surprised by these numerous comments because people would make it a point to always stop me in the halls of the Myers or in the lobby and share these feelings with me every time I was there. And you could see for yourself. You're welcome to come see these wonderful residents this Sunday at the Myers. We're having a Shiva for them in the activity room from 4 to 6, and there'll be, of course, kosher pastries from Unger's and kosher chocolate potato chips from Chocolate Emporium and coffee. So, and these people love visitors. So please come over and come feel the love. Those who knew my mom well knew that she wanted very little, only to love deeply and to get a little love back. She was so sentimental and nostalgic and tender. She was not afraid to ever reveal and share her love, her fears, her feelings, her tears. She would cry watching pet commercials on TV, not the ones showing animal abuse and the ones that pulled on your heartstrings, just the ones that sold pet food and flea collars. She was an old-fashioned Jewish mother. She kept a traditional Jewish home. I love coming home from school on Fridays and smelling the dinner cooking, seeing a cleaned home with the lines in the carpeting and the bathroom spotless, and watching her light the Shabbos candles, which she did every Friday night. She wasn't religious, but super spiritual and talked to God all of the time, asking for nothing for herself, only blessings for those dear to her. My mother cooked just about every night. She made the most wonderful soups: matzo ball, split pea, potato, minestrone and vegetable, potato latkes, chopped liver, noodle kugel, brisket, chicken, and on and on. Not just Jewish food, but everything. Wicked spaghetti and meatballs, letting the sauce simmer on the stove all day, meatloaf, pancakes with chocolate chip smiley faces for us, you name it. My father and Raleigh were trapped in her web. She knew all too well that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. I grew up conversing with her many, many very cool friends. I'm sorry. Couples that would come over for gourmet dinner parties in San Francisco in the 60s, couples that would come over for dinner parties and then to play cards until midnight, either bridge or gin, friends that were lovely and rich in character, intelligent and loyal. I loved her friends. She spent much of her time on the phone with her friends and relatives or writing long letters to them on a regular basis. She loved people. They loved her. She loved that I had so many friends. She loved them. They adored her. They always asked about her my entire life. She didn't treat them as kids, but as people. She sat and talked to them. She spent time with them, and vice versa. She played the piano so beautifully, always by reading music, not from memory. To me, it was like she had superpowers. I was in awe of it. I was so proud of her when I heard her play. It set her apart. Our home was filled with piano music constantly as she taught, I believe, 40 students a week while we lived in Walnut Creek in the Bay Area. Sometimes wonderful piano, and at times like fingernails on a chalkboard. One of her students, Mike Miller, as the rabbi mentioned, was a neighbor of ours in San Francisco. My mother was dear friends with Mike Miller's mother. He wrote to her from all over the world. He enjoyed a lot of success and eventually moved to New Zealand, and he would call her and write long letters to her, and it was touching. And the respect and the love was just touching. I mentioned her passing on Facebook, and Carrie Greenfield extended her condolences. My mom was dear friends with the Greenfields, Sherry and Lee Greenfield. They lived next to the Spokanes, and we would go over there all the time. And she ended up teaching Carrie Greenfield piano, and Carrie became very accomplished at the piano and just loved my mom. So Mike Miller attributed his passion for music to my mother. He wrote to her from all over the world. I said that. He was the musical director for the television show Solid Gold, hosted by Dionne Warwick. And while I was in high school, I was visiting California and reached out to him, and he invited me to the set. And I met Dionne Warwick and just thought that was so cool. And he told me she was kind of sassy. And then I watched the recording of the show, and I was just sitting there thinking about how proud I was of my mom. Just a little side note of music, on music. My mom was born in 27. She grew up in the 30s and 40s, developing her passion for music. And she knew all of the standards, and she sang them all, and she played them all on the piano, all the pop standards. She loved them. And she loved that I loved music, and I would just sit in my room and play and keep upgrading my stereo, and she didn't necessarily understand my music of the 60s and 70s and on, but that didn't mean that I didn't try to make that bond with her. And I would bring her up to my room and put the headphones on and put Trick of the Tail on from Genesis, and Street Life Serenade from Billy Joel, which I thought she'd relate to a little more because of the piano and his style, and just make her lay down on the carpeting with me and watch her face while she listened to it. And I didn't let her listen to 2 minutes. I made her listen to, 3 or 4 songs until I could tell she was done. she just marveled in the fact that I loved music as much as she did. And just, I mean, every time I went to a concert and we talked on the phone, and she maybe knew who I was talking about, and usually she didn't, but she was just enthralled that I had this passion as she did. Eleanor had the Jewish guilt thing down to a science. She was also the world's greatest worrier. She tried to figure out how to control the outcome of the impossible. Danielle said that she would wait home and couldn't fall asleep until she got home from going out, and I knew that all too well. Part of this, what I consider a character flaw, was exacerbated by yours truly. My mom always, three alwayses, had her hands full with me. And while her hands were full with me, thank God she was only aware of, let's say, 5% of the trouble that I was causing at the time. Of course, after the really bad behavior stopped, I came clean with maybe another 45%. The whole truth would have absolutely done her in. Our relationship was close, open, honest, rich, mutually admiring one another, and passionate. I had no problem being brutally honest with her because I always wanted to keep it real. She loved me with all of her being, unconditionally, sometimes to a fault. She babied me, some say enabled me, to the day she died, often finding it very difficult to let go and face reality. I took her down some rocky roads and some roller coaster rides that dwarfed those at Cedar Point, believe me. She never focused on the troubles I created or suffered from, always on the accomplishments and achievements. She was proud of me, and that always kept me going forward. She read me like a book and knew by my face or voice if I was under the weather, even when I tried hard to fake it for her sake during her illness. She would say, "Howie, are you happy? Are you content?" She would have gladly sold her soul to the devil in exchange for my happiness. By the grace of God, my sobriety allowed me to be of maximum service to her, and I took the job quite seriously, especially after Raleigh died in 2012, especially when she was first hospitalized a couple years ago from congestive heart failure and COPD. It was my mission to understand everything so I could be her advocate and make her comfortable. I spent hours talking with and to her doctors, nurses, home health care workers, social workers, administrators, owners, suppliers, hospice workers, family, whoever. I was her right-hand man. She appreciated it and thanked me relentlessly. I told her it was a pleasure. She took excellent care of me, and it was the least I could do for her. It was an honor. She was proud of the work I accomplished, and I'm glad because I did it in part for her and always sought her pride. I wanted her to see Danielle and Jeff's baby, my new office, to spend more time with Christy and her children who brought her love and joy, to keep reading the paper and working crossword puzzles while munching on grapes or raspberries in bed, to keep watching the news, Mary Tyler Moore, Golden Girls, Little House on the Prairie, Bonanza, Wild Wild West, Gunsmoke, Jeopardy, The Tribe, and on, to keep playing solitaire, to keep enjoying her afternoon naps, to keep going to high tea at 3 every day, to keep singing, keep endearing herself to the healthcare workers who saw her beauty, to keep donating to the animal charities, to keep getting her hair and nails done every Friday, to keep, cover your ears, Rabbi, to keep eating shrimp outside the Myers, to keep her relationship going with the Myers rabbis, to keep shopping at Heinen's and Mark's and CVS every Friday, and eating at Jack's, to keep delivering that sharp wit, and keep telling jokes, and keep putting on makeup before ever leaving the home, to keep smiling, to continue lighting people up, and to keep cherishing life and all of its splendor and beauty. I am grateful for her. I celebrate her long, wonderful life. I will attempt to carry her spirit, wisdom, insightfulness, and humor with me and pass it on to everyone I can. As my friend Warren said last night, may my mother be bound with the patriarchs and matriarchs of Zion. And as I say, may she rejoice with the spirits of her parents, my father, stepfather, friends and loved ones, and most of all, Hashem, which is the word for God. May God cloak her in his warmth and compassion. And please, Mom, keep watching over me and the family. We love you. I love you.
O God of life, amid the ceaseless tides of change which sweep away the generations, your love remains to comfort us and to give us hope. Around us are life and death, decay and renewal, the flowing rhythm that all things obey. Our life is a dance to a song we cannot hear. Its melody courses through us for a little while, then it seems to cease. Whence the melody, and whither does it go? In darkness as in light, we turn to you, the source of life and the answer to all of life's mysteries. Will you please rise now for the Eil Malei Rachamim? Eil Malei Rachamim shochein bamromim, hamtzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina, im kadoshim utahorim kazohar harakia mazhirim et nishmat Ella bat Yitzchak and Irene, Shahacha la'olama, Bala Rachamim Yastireh B'Seter Kanafav la'olamim, V'yitzra B'Tzra HaChayim et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata V'Tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava V'Nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Eleanor Gogolick, our loved one who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us say together, Amen. Will you please be seated? I want to announce that the family of Ellie Gogolick will receive friends at the residence of Gail and Bill Wexler at 2432 Richmond Road. They will receive friends today immediately following our interment ceremony and until 8 o'clock tonight, and then again tomorrow, Friday, from 12 noon until 4 in the afternoon. Our service will now continue at graveside at the Hillcrest Cemetery. Once again, on behalf of the family, we so much appreciate your presence here this afternoon.